It's so very lovely to see you today. And it's quite strange because we haven't met, and yet I feel that I know an awful lot about you just because you've been. I
feel like I know you really well too.
Long, but also,
yeah.
But also, obviously, there was the In My Bones thing and all the rest of it. But I don't feel this is unfamiliar. I just feel beautifully excited to see you at last.
I feel exactly the same way. It's strange how, I don't know, I guess for me it's rare to really meet the families of people that you're close to in the music industry, because everyone's so, traveling all the time, and you see them for a day when you're on tour. And I think just knowing that you're such a huge part of Jacob's life, and then the way that he's let me into his life and such a, we've become such good friends. And I just feel like I'm kind of part of your family already. Even though I've never been over or anything, I just feel like I'd fit right in.
And I don't really know why you haven't been over. Where are you right now?
I'm in New York. But next time I'm over, I'm going to have to come for a lovely home-cooked meal, right?
But you've really got to do that. But I mean, have you got any plans to come over the pond, or am I going to see you first when I come over there?
I do have plans.
Okay, that's good.
I'm going to be in Europe actually next month, so I'll hit you guys up for sure. Okay. And then I'm sure I'll be back on the road, early next year and be hitting London. So yay!
Okay, no, we're really going to do this now. So that's absolutely fine-ho. I'm sure you don't realise how much of an impact you have made on not only my life, but all three of my chicks. And there is something so beautifully, unashamedly daring and gorgeously creative about just everything you kind of allow out, really. And I think it's important that I say that, because not because I planned it, because I didn't, but I really feel it. And I wonder, as far as creativity is concerned, when do you actually feel you're most creative? Because obviously, if I look at all the videos you've done, or all the footage or anything, then that's just a tiny little weeny bit, isn't it? It's not really showing me how often you're creative or how you're creative. So when does it happen for you?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because now that you ask me, my most creative moments are probably in private, or just with one other person around. And it's funny, you're right, that the things that you see of my work are music videos and all that. And not to say they're not creative, of course they are. And that I'm, behind every decision and all of that. But, they're very administrative too. They're very technical.
Yeah.
You're often very self-conscious. You've got label people around. Even on tour, I don't know what Jacob's like, but a lot of my set is very planned out. So we have moments for improvisation. But, we're playing a show. And so, those moments where I'm most in that flow zone, or where I go, there is no other thing I'm meant to do on this earth but do this, is when the seed of an idea begins and I jump on it, and I would do anything, I would stop anything to jump on it, because it feels like God's work. It's the most important thing in that moment. You know what I mean? That sort of urgency that takes over. And I turn into a little child. I have all my inhibitions go, and I'm playing in the playground, and it's often one other person who gets to see me in that space. I very rarely have my phone out in those spaces. I find that might, I don't know, I'm so sensitive to not kill that
oh yeah,
right, what is
absolutely.
the word, it's not fragile because it's a bold feeling, but there's a sort of sacredness to it or something. And so it's like being in church. You don't want to raise your voice too loud to throw off the vibe or something, right? Like you just want to keep it safe, whatever is happening in that moment. So yeah, not many people do see that, but it's probably in that inception of an idea that I feel most creative.
Okay, but there's nurturing this tiny little seed. And you're right, the seed, when you see it there, has got this outer protection, and actually if you throw it on the ground, it's going to be fine. It might even grow into something. But actually it's more than that, isn't it? Because we are natural killing machines, and with our own emotional stuff, we can just literally extinguish it straight away. Yes. So I think the fact that you're saying it's often a private thing, that's really powerful, and I can really resonate with that. And you say it could be one other person. Is there a particular person who it could be, or could it just be a person who just happens to be in your life at that particular time, and you're willing somehow to open the door and to say, do you want to just glance at this little seed just here? I mean, what kind of person is that who you would let into that intimate and private space?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's an engineer, and that might be if I've been working at Electric Lady this last couple of weeks.
Oh, lucky girl.
Oh my God, I know, right? What a friggin' dream. And, there's engineers there who come through every day and you just meet them for the first time and they're doing a great job. But, because they're so good at what they do, they know how to hang back, but they know how to be there to because I engineer my own sessions, much like Jacob, but it's like they'll know when to jump in to give me some extra help. And so often they end up being these flies on the wall to something really exciting happening, and experiencing something very intimate, even when they're really kind of strangers. So I always find that dynamic really interesting, and I actually always say to my engineers, please speak out in the session if you have ideas or if you feel the need to affirm something that I'm doing, because for me there's nothing worse than having someone in the room that is just completely disengaged from the act.
Absolutely.
Like a label person on their phone at the back of the room, the couch or something, or
yes.
or an engineer who feels it's their job to just click buttons and never comment on anything. I'm like, you're here at Electric Lady because you're good, and I want to know what you have to say. And so often it is these more technical people that get to witness these moments of flow. It's rarely my partners, even romantic partners. I think I'm a little compartmentalized with my work. I do kind of keep it, I go into my cave, and I can be quite shy around friends and romantic partners sometimes. It's such a specific zone that I get into that it's probably reserved for collaborators and people with technical roles in the industry. Yeah,
but that is interesting because obviously the label person on their phone in the back of the room, we've all experienced this in some kind of a way. They feel they're having their role, but it's not necessary to interact with you, and you're bringing that engineer figure into having a role because you know that they've been brought in because they can do what they can do. So you're trying to utilize that. But that means that surely you're spending a bit of time trying to put them at their ease so that they can feel kind of all right to interact with you, and they've never met you and that you don't know how they feel about you. And the really important thing is that you're right, they're not an intimate partner in any sense, are they? So you won't necessarily see them even the next day for recording, okay?
I know.
So maybe that's really important that they aren't intimate in any kind of a way, but
it's tricky, isn't it? It's kind of reminding me of the fan relationship as well, because I talk about this with a lot of other artist friends of mine. I know that many fans feel they don't want to overstep or be invasive. Yes. So they will just ask for a photo because they don't want to take up your time or anything. They just want to get something that will be a moment to remember and leave. But actually, for someone like me who's kind of, how do I explain? I'm just a verbal processor, and I like to connect with my eyes. Otherwise, I feel quite disengaged and actually like anxious as well, if I'm not getting that human connection. It's a lot less invasive for me to have that conversation, to have that. That's actually life-giving to me, as opposed to the sort of take mentality of let's do this very, sort of what I guess transactional thing. That takes more from me because it's not my natural posture in the world or something. So maybe it's a bit similar to that with engineers as well. It's like I need to get a bit of humanity into the room, taking the risk maybe, yes, that it will be then hard if they're not there the next day. But for me, that's a like risk I'm willing to take rather than just having people come in and out that aren't really having much soul connection to the work.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you say that you're a verbal processor. And I also think it's really interesting that you say that perhaps it makes you feel anxious or disengaged without that kind of connection in there, that you want a bit of humanity. You don't really want to have a kind of a transactional experience. And so I'm going to say I really understand that one with fans. And in a sense, if we have time, I'd love to come back to that. But do you feel like you're like that with all the relationships you have in your life? So those close to you and maybe those who you just feel are friends, you don't see them very often, but do you feel that it is not really possible to have a closeness in a transactional way? Does it have to be based in a kind of humanity reality?
Yeah, this is a complex question to answer because it's one of those things that you refine and work on as you get older, I think. Like they say you get maybe more selective about the people you have close to you in your life in your 30s or something, right? Like as you start to have maybe less, but the ones that are there are really close, you know?
Yes.
I think that I might have learned the hard way when I was young, in my early 20s, sort of tried to get on that level with everyone, you know,
yes.
people at labels,
yes.
You know, really didn't really understand that concept of like, no, they're just a sort of colleague and you've just got to understand they do this thing. You don't have to have a long email exchange with them. You don't have to try and go over for dinner and have long phone calls. Just keep it transactional. I didn't really know how to do that. I didn't really know how to engage without my heart. And then I would, of course, get heartbroken when I went through 6 A&Rs at Warner Brothers over the first 5 years or something. You know, because these were people that I didn't understand that the industry was just so dog eat dog like that. And it became clear to me that to stay grounded and to be strong and all of those things as a woman in the industry, I had to learn to actually not be rude or kind of be, I don't like the word transactional when it comes to relationships, but to understand that some people, you know, you just simply didn't have the bandwidth for everyone to be on that level with you. I've realized the great power in when engaging with fans or when engaging with people in the industry, just the power of just smiling and nodding and giving your full attention, but not having to, as a verbal process, and not having to explain yourself over and over and tell every story over. And like, I've done a few silent retreats, Suzie, and when you come back from a silent retreat, you're so economic with your words. You speak only when you need to, and when you say things, you really say what you mean. And I think that's a new power I've sort of grown as a woman, as I've grown older, is that you don't have to give everyone everything. And that doesn't mean that you're not loving either. It's actually very loving to just listen and just to, you know, and I see that in you, I see that in your son. It's like these are things that I want to train in myself. And I think some of it was insecurity when I was young too. I thought it was
totally.
all love, but I think it was insecurity, right? It was like, I don't want to be misunderstood ever.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want anyone to think I'm not nice. So I'll talk all the time to make sure they know that I'm really, you know, it's like, just chill. You're not going to be everyone's cup of tea, but just be present. Just be present. And that doesn't have to be with a lot of words and a lot of heavy, intimate exchanges.
It doesn't, but I'm really fascinated by what you say. I could not have guessed that you were going to say that. But I would say that I was really very, 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 very similar. In fact, I think I'd go a step further and I'd say, gosh, so many of the relationships I see around me as a teenage something or a 20-something, they seem to be very on the surface, very shallow. And why doesn't anybody talk about what's really happening in there? And I remember just thinking, every single person I meet, I want to invest something that is really meaningful and something about me that I'm giving. Now, I agree with you that there was certainly a time, and actually it was in my 30s, that I thought, in fact, I had a very good conversation with a friend, and that friend said to me, you know, you've known me for years, and you know that this really awful thing happened to me in my life a few years ago. And when this happened, I felt I had to tell absolutely everybody in order to kind of feel that had got digested and out of the way, and they were still going to like me. Okay. And I realized that I had been the same, and various things had happened to me when I was young. And I felt the need to just say, oh, by the way, I have experienced kind of grief, you know, it's a really bad thing. And then you realize you actually don't. The most important thing, as you say, is really listening, because if we actively listen, then we are having a deep and meaningful interaction, even if we're not exchanging a whole lot of intimate information.
Wow. I love that. I think that's absolutely true. I really do. And, you know, here's another thing. I'm so lucky as an artist with a platform that I get to share in these deep and meaningful ways in, what's the word? in particular modes, like I do an interview with someone like yourself, or a magazine or something like this, and I get to speak at length about the things that really matter to me, and sort of broadcast, and it gets retweeted, it gets sent out. So that's kind of a great gift as well, is that we as artists, we get to put it into our record, into our interview. Yeah. And then I kind of get liberated after, because I go, I can shut the fuck up now, because it's like, it's true. I've done it, I don't owe people to have to, I want to be selective about the ways that I open up about my record. I want to be selective about the work that I put out.
Yes.
And then, I think I do deserve to have a little emotional privacy, because it's such an outpouring to do this in my work. But it kind of, in a way, it means I don't have to do it every time, because you can kind of, you're a bit of an open book. It's kind of on the internet anyway, right? So it's like, you don't have to go into too much depth about every relationship. It's like, well, honestly, I wrote a song about it. I'd love you to check it out. It's like, it's all there. It's in the work. And that's quite freeing as well,
Yeah, you've got the work, you've got the, you've got such a following, you can give out in whatever way you want in social media sense. And yes, you're doing interviews and things all the time. But I wonder what it feels like to be you when you are doing an interview and you think either, perhaps wrong-headedly, this person's out to get me, or they're out to just show that I am not a nice person, or that I've made some ill decisions or something. How do you feel when because you know it, you're so instinctive that you're going to tell as soon as you get into that interview situation whether somebody is there just really waiting to just cut you out and trip you up?
I don't know if I'd know. I think now I would. I didn't used to.
Okay.
Definitely not. Yeah, I think I didn't used to. I very early on did think everyone was my best friend if they were a journalist. And because they come off that way, right? Like, it's so inviting the way that people at magazines or papers, they've done all this research on your life, and they ask you all these really great questions, and they get into things that, seem really meaningful topics to talk about. Like, I learned the hard way early on, when people go into big topics like politics or religion or faith and things like this, that are like,
yes,
whoo, I'm like, here's what I say nowadays. I say, look, if you're giving me 4 pages in your paper, or we're doing a full magazine spread, we got an hour on a podcast, sure, let's go. But if you're looking for a soundbite and you're going to do a 20-minute piece on me or something, we are not talking about those things. I'm sorry. No. Because they deserve attention from people. They are nuanced topics, and I'm not interested in being reduced to labels, to quick sound bites on issues that are so huge,
It's also really difficult.
That's taken a long time to get the confidence to say that, and not feel like I just have to answer everything, because everyone wants to find out what an artist thinks about absolutely everything, and we're all learning too.
I agree, but I wonder whether there are these topics that you just feel are really kind of, we're just not going to go there, because actually at the age of 32 or however old you may be at the time, you're thinking a particular thing, you're feeling a particular thing, and it's going down right now in the annals of kind of virtual memory, where it stays, and then somebody can pick that out 10 years later and just say, but she did say this, and they can take it out of context, and it's really awful. So you're saying that, if it's a 20-minute soundbite, you wouldn't really go there. But perhaps if it was a kind of a long-form thing, you might. But does it not still worry you in some way?
Well, I guess that's a good point. I think, maybe the dream for an artist in my position is to get to the level, rather, where you have a certain amount of leverage to not dictate, what's the word, sort of sculpt how you're going to tell your story, and you pick the kind of platforms, and it's very rare to be able to do that. You'd have to be, I guess, as big as Adele or something to be able to handpick who you want to do the media for your press release. But
I guess so.
I mean, you know what I mean, though, right? Like, when you're starting out, you sort of have to you're taking everything you can. You're doing this 7 showcases at South by Southwest. You're doing everything, because your manager's saying you got to get out there. But I think you get to a different stage of your career where you can perhaps go for those outlets that are going to spend a little more time with an artist and maybe do a video piece where they get to talk with their hands. And, if I get to talk with my face, it's a very different thing. I can explain nuance as opposed to just written word
totally.
or tweets.
Yes.
Or, so you start to get constructive about how you open up. But you make a very good point. I mean, we still live in a time where anything you say can be used against you down the line. And all I would say to that is, I am grateful that we now have platforms where we can cut out the middleman altogether. So this is one of them. Like, we're going together.
Amazing.
No one's interfering with this.
No.
This is going right on Instagram. I'll pick what I want to put on my Instagram. You'll pick what you want to put on yours. We're completely in control. I have been working, it's a very top secret, I haven't told anyone about it yet, but I have been working on my own podcast in the making for this very reason, because there are many things I want to share actually around topics of spirituality and huge issues in our life right now. I think we're all searching for substance and sort of meaning, and maybe hungrier than ever, especially coming out of the pandemic and all the loss and grief we've gone through. So what a blessing to be able to, like, the artists and actors and comedians are taking to platforms where they don't have to involve any papers. They're just talking directly to their fans, and they're getting all the nuance in the world because they have like 100 episodes to unpack their views on a certain political idea or something. So that makes me feel encouraged, because it's, maybe something could still be taken out of context, but it's pretty rare that someone would do that, because you'd immediately be able to say back, well, hey buddy, just listen to the whole podcast and it'll make sense. You know what I mean? It's like, you're not done. I think anyone would be pretty dumb to try and take you out of context on your own show. That is, you know what I'm saying, right? Like, there's a world that lives around sound bites from a podcast, so people can, I think there's more space for the person to, like, really unpack their ideas and not have to concentrate them into quick things that just grab headlines.
It's so true. And of course you do have your podcast. I know, because I know Jacob's done it. I don't know how you feel about it, but I remember when I did the very first one, and what I did before then is that I kind of soaked myself in lots of different podcasts that people suggested I have a listen to.
Cool.
And it was cool in one sense, and it was really anti-cool in another. Because I got to that first podcast thinking, all the different things that I like about other people's podcasts are A to Z. They're like this. And I kind of want to be those things. And I felt that I couldn't be, because I hadn't found myself in it. And I feel much more as you've described, which is that it's amazing actually hosting a podcast, because although people could just imagine that we are just asking questions and just waiting for responses, that's not what a podcast is it? It's about the interaction and what's actually happening between you as some aspect of a conversation is explored. And so we're so lucky, aren't we?
It's huge. This was not something available to people, in different times. And I think it really does feel like a powerful way of communication that doesn't involve multiple people overseeing everything and signing off and funding. Even the money part of it can be sort of a bit removed, apart from when you get sponsors involved. But it's like, still, it feels like quite a pure, like, I don't know if it'll last like this forever, right? Because everything seems to get exploited eventually, but like
and made into something else. It kind of morphs into something else. But I agree, this does kind of feel like the purest form there is. And I think it's amazing actually, since the pandemic, that we've so gotten used to what it feels like to relate to a face on a screen and to feel that person is actually 3D, and as though you really are here with me, and it's okay, and we can feel that we get on, and it's an all right thing. I think that's absolutely unbelievable, because I think before that time I would have naturally just said, I don't like really being on the phone. It's true. I don't really like having video calls. Just don't particularly like it, because it's just not the real McCoy. But actually, we've got so used to it. I am amazed at how comfortable it feels. The only worry that I have is whether actually we're going to keep the connection going so that we can hear each other and the film's going to keep on going. That's my only worry. There's no other worry.
Apart from
don't
that,
you think that's a weird thing? How...
Well, it shows how adaptable we are as human beings, right? Like, it doesn't take us that long to adapt to a new environment and you know, adjust accordingly to feel safe and to feel connected. We're incredibly resilient and amazing. Yeah.
No, it's really true. But we talk about connection, and connection's a really, really important thing. And yet you have said what's really interesting is that if you go on a silent retreat, when you come back, I'm going to paraphrase you badly now, but when you come back, you're kind of economic with the words that you say. But maybe if it's just said in a really genuine way from a place of reality and from being in the present, then that is connectivity. And so we don't need to have all the kind of frilly floweriness because it's just is as it is. But I don't know how often you remind yourself that that is indeed the situation, if indeed you see it like that. How often do you need reminding, you know, from day to day, from week to week, from year to year? How often do you need reminding that actually it's all there as long as you're absolutely here? And
right. Because that is true, isn't it? It's like every night I go on stage, and it's like kind of a distant memory now, to be honest. It's been so long since I've been on stage for a crowd, but I remember writing things on my arm to remember certain things, and one of them would be connection over perfection. It was always, you know, connection over perfection, because I'm a chronic perfectionist, and, you know, but I just knew that if I could connect with the audience, then that would actually override any you know, the transcendence that might come from perfection could be achieved, you know, just as intensely, if not more so, by connection. And I realized that because every night I'd make a mistake or something. I talk about this in my podcast, actually, but it creates this lean in from the audience, where people actually lean in when you have an error or when you do something, you know, that's unexpected, take a twist in the set. They lean in. There's a sort of motion of, you know, and that's figuratively and literally, right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, what just happened there? And as soon as you have that engagement, that attention, now you don't really have to do very much at all. Now you could just say, one word as opposed to 10, and it might really land with far more clarity. In terms of how often I need to be reminded, well, that's really where strong friends come in. Community that can remind you that you're enough without all of the glam and the, like you said, the frills, that you're enough even without all of the affirmation from the industry or even your fans. You know, like, you're enough without Instagram, you're enough without, and just having those people that keep reminding you. You know, I love when my friends, I've got a couple of friends who look me in the eye before I go on stage or whatever, and they're just like, this is what you do. This is what you've been doing your whole life.
Yeah.
It's what you do. Like, you know, that sort of simple affirmation of just like, hey, remember, like, literally, you've been doing this your whole life.
Absolutely.
You know exactly. And it's so funny because I do forget. I do think, what if I can't do this? And I find that so beautiful when someone reminds you that, you know, you've put in those 10,000 hours, and this is the thing you know how to do. There's other stuff that might be freaky but like the stage, no, girl, that's what you do know.
It's really true,
isn't it? Yeah. But we forget, and it's just like a chef doesn't get to the kitchen and go like, you know, like holding the knife, like shaking, and just like, you know what to do. You've been using the knife for years. You've been making amazing meals. But somehow the crippling self-doubt of an artist is just, it's a very, I don't want to say it's unique, because I'm sure there's many people that, I think so. You know, everyone struggles with self-doubt. But it feels like a particular strain.
I completely
the self-doubt of an artist. Like, it's particularly, maybe because it's also laced with narcissism and like...
Well, it is.
Self-absorption.
Absolutely, because I mean, we have a lovely recipe that we're just putting all together in there, and I'm afraid all those things are in there. It's really true. And I think the other thing that goes into this lovely kind of melting pot is the fact that even though we have close friends and perhaps family, and it was Ella, my youngest, who most recently did that for me. She just basically said exactly the same thing. You've been doing this all your life. This is what you do. What are you talking about? And it was absolutely marvelous. And it wasn't kind of, oh dear, poor you, you're feeling like this. It was just cutting to the quick, and that's really wonderful. But how is it that we can forget, like every single time or every other time, we're in that same position of just thinking, oh, hold on, this isn't feeling so positive. I actually need to do something active in order to remind myself that this isn't something to do with me. This is something to do with what I'm giving. And we don't necessarily have an Ella or a really close friend who's standing in the wings saying, come on, all right? Yeah. Here you go. Just get on out there. So
you're right, you don't always have that person with you.
We don't. Yeah. Okay, so there's you, and you are going to be performing every night. It's going to be coming right back at you, girl. But what's going to happen when you're there in the wings and actually no one's there right now? They've all bombed out. They're somewhere else dealing with somebody else's problem or whatever. What do you do at that moment? Seriously.
As soon as he said this, I had multiple things springing to mind because I'm a bit like Jacob in this sense. You know how he keeps those iPhone notes of like what to do when we need to be happy, like what to do when depressed or whatever. And it's like
it's so good. I know, it's fantastic. He's taught us all. It's just so good.
It's beautiful, and I'm exactly the same. They're not quite as long as his, but mine. I have these tools that I've acquired from great people I've met through the years, through therapists, through ancient scriptures that have been helpful for me, you know. And tattoo, you know, has become a way for me to remind myself also, if I can get it, you know, etched into my damn skin, maybe I'll remember to look at it on my arms when I perform. But recently another one has been actually, you know, I do believe in I do believe that when people pass, they're still somehow here, or they're you know, they're different now. They've changed. None of us know, do we? But I did lose a very close, really my best friend from New Zealand since I was 6 years old, 2 years ago now, and she died of like a heart arrhythmia out of nowhere, and at 30 years old. So it's been the first big grief of my life, the big first loss. And you know it, I'm sure, the first one that came, and it really shakes us all up. Yeah. And I have struggled about how to keep Emily alive now, because she's not here physically, but I refuse to stop talking about her or to, you know, forget her. I refuse to. It's like I must keep her going, and you know, so I will talk about her often, and I will, you know, write about her, and sometimes I talk to her. So a recent you know, tool for me has been to conjure Emily in the bathroom. I'll be, you know, getting ready before the show, and I'll just imagine she's there with me. And, you know, in a way, it is very real to me because she's not a physical person now. So if she's anything, then she is spirit. So it is, you know, in a sense, it's not wild to me that she might be sort of a vapor in the bathroom with me, you know, who knows, maybe she is. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that crazy. It's like, she's an energetic. I
completely get it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just beautiful. And sometimes if I surrender myself to that space of, I am interacting with spirit in this moment, I am interacting with Emily, sometimes words will come up. And I know this sounds a little strange, but I guess this is how prayer works for me as well, or meditation. If I bring myself to a place of attention, sometimes a word will rise up that, and I'll coin it like this: it's a thought that chose me to think it. Something like that, you know what I mean? It's like I didn't quite conjure it, but it chose me to be the vessel for thinking it. And here's one that came right before a stripped down concert I did in New York back in February. It said, the voice said to me, who knows where it came from, right? But it said, nothing to prove, everything to give. And I just thought, and I laughed because it felt like M. She was like that. She was unapologetically irreverent. She had nothing to prove to anyone. She was absolutely, but everything to give. I mean, what a mantra. So I didn't have anyone else. No one else gave me that. That was me in the bathroom with Emily. And that was all I said to myself that night. was nothing to prove. I got nothing to prove, but I got everything to give. What a different way to approach a performance.
There's two things. It's wonderful, but I think Em, wherever you are, it is actually a real feeling of just knowing that there is no limit. There is no limit to how much you can give at all, ever.
It's
and when
abundant.
there is no limit to everything you can give, it's abundant, but also there is nothing to prove, because there's all the time in the world. There's everything to give. It's absolute. It's so bountiful, isn't it? So the fact that whoever gave you that thought has given it in a way that we can actually apply to absolutely everything. I also really love the idea of getting to a place of attention and having a thought that chose me to think it, because I think it shows that things are happening outside ourselves. And in the same way that we talked about connectivity, we're connected to every aspect of the world and every aspect of whether it is the spirit, or whether it's just a feel, or whether it's just something that you sense, as well as the physicality. And that's incredible. Nothing can take away the grief of somebody passing at the age of 30, when it's a bolt out of the blue and you've lived alongside this person who obviously saw you grow into who you needed to be, and you did exactly the same. You saw her grow into who she needed to be, and it's kind of, right, okay, now we're a bit more cooked, it's time to go and live a little bit of life. And yet you didn't really have that opportunity to have that with her.
No, that's right. Yeah, it's big stuff, really big stuff. And you're right, 30s are kind of, I feel the injustice of that, because I feel like I'm coming into these realizations where I'm like, okay, now I'm ready to go, it's like, and she was an actress, so she was just embarking on her career, just getting started. So life is hard, and life is feels very cruel and unjust, and so, what else can we do but continue to connect with them wherever they are, and just learn from them, celebrate them, and take that playful spirit that she brought. I want to find ways to embrace silliness as much as I can. I've been a very serious person a lot of my life, to be honest. I know a lot of my art is very vivacious and fun. A lot of the early art was very colorful and
very.
But I can be quite serious and quite contemplative and introspective, and take things very seriously. And I think, I'm really trying to loosen up. And Emily was like, she's so playful. But that's why people, like Jacob, when they come into my life, it's like, oh, Lord, you sent, a brotherly, that immediate brother-sister thing. Like, that's so sacred to me.
No, he said the same thing.
Yeah, it's like immediately, like, oh, we've just grown up together. Like, we're just brother-sister, done. And it's like, it's just whatever you can do to try to inject play wherever you go. It's such a gift. Because there's so much to be serious about all the time. Like, there's so much seriousness. Life is so serious, So why not, like, I don't know if I'm making sense, but I guess, it's just like something I've taken a while to learn. I wish, when they say, what would you say to your younger self, now that you're looking back, I would just be like, girl, just have a little more fun,
I love the idea of embracing silliness. And again, it kind of makes me go back to a memory that I haven't been back to for a very long time, partly because it's really, really painful. But I'm thinking about how I guess I've always had just a slight kind of off-the-wall bonkersness about me. And if I see friends who I haven't seen for 30 years or more, they'll say, you haven't changed, it's still kind of there, it's just bonkers. But when you get to the kind of the serious thing, and obviously we can all remember those places where you need to be really serious, and you're in a situation where you have to be really serious, and you're just absolutely bricking it because you just know you need to laugh just real bad. And it's just one of those, it's a reaction, isn't it? But I remember being at school, and my mother had passed, and I had to go into school the next day because I was leading the orchestra in a concert, and actually I didn't want to do anything else. I just wanted to just sort of get in there. And I remember in the lunch break just getting a load of my friends, and we just got out loads of instruments in a music class, and we were just kind of doing all sorts of really stupid things. And I remember kind of looking at myself from a distance away and just thinking, why are you doing something so ridiculously silly at this time? And the answer, there was no answer at that time. I just knew that I had to do it. And years later, I look back and I think I really had to get something out. And actually, the really difficult feelings that I was feeling, I couldn't get those out in a real kind of a sense. I just had to get the energy out in some kind of a way.
Wow.
Which is...
That makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot of sense, but I think when I speak to you, well, yeah, it does now, but when I speak to you and I just kind of think about your energy and how you kind of need to get ideas out there, and, you know, how they will, and they'll explode into something really colourful, or they'll be much more black or whatever, that actually I wonder what kind of self-expression this really is. So you might say, well, yes, you know, the latest album, you know, there's a lot more darkness in there, and it's true, that is definitely true from the outside. I feel that, but it's still got that same vibrance and daring energy in there that all the obvious colour has. But I just wonder with you, as far as expression is concerned, you know you can be serious, you want to get a bit of the silliness, but can you see in your own life how crazily similar those two worlds are, and how actually they, in one sense, are completely one and the same? You're just looking at it from a slightly different angle.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that with me, because I guess that's one thing I don't have is objectivity on my own career and my own self and Kimbra here, right? It's like I don't see how those two, I just sort of, I guess I can never experience it the way that fans will, or even collaborators. But I think what I take from that is that, it's a cliche, I guess, but, you know, art imitates life, life imitates art. It's like, as I work on these parts of myself and access different things in my own life, they do start to manifest in the music. But here's what is interesting, is that I don't have to have worked through something in my own life for the music to know it before I have.
That's the thing. Do you think that's amazing?
I do think that's amazing. And that has happened time and time again. It's not, that's why, like, therapy and things like that, you know how you have to, like, have an insight and then, you know, you can talk about it because you went there in therapy and now you can talk about it. Music's not like that.
No.
You can write a song that can be, like, all about some traumatic thing in your childhood, and you don't even know that you're processing it through a melody or and you don't even know. And then years later, you'll realize, oh my Lord, I'd written that song about this situation. I never knew it at the time.
That's right.
And that is baffling to me, and still, you know, for me, confirms that there's something bigger than us moving through all this. Because, and I call it like prophecy, you know, and like a prophetic imagination that's alive in us before we even know it. So, what you're saying to me now makes me think that, there's a silliness that comes out in my work, even when I'm feeling serious. There's a seriousness that comes out when I'm feeling very vacuous and frivolous, because they're oscillating, and they're all talking. They're talking to one another. The music is talking to me, and I'm talking to it.
What would you? The thing is, I really get it, and I get it because I understand what it is to give in an art form. But for those folks who are going to listen to our conversation and going to invest this time, which is amazing, but if they do, then I wonder what they can take from us saying, we kind of get it, and, you know, here's an idea that's come out and we don't know why it's come out, and maybe it relates back to this that I felt some months ago, and it's so fantastic to process it. How do we get stuff out and express that energy that needs to come out if we haven't got an art form that can be used as a vehicle?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, you know, everyone is creative, whether they, admit to it or not. I think to be a human is to be a creative. We are creating. We have been created somehow through the universe, and we are now creating the universe. So that, to me, isn't a question. It's, like you said, what is the vehicle and what is the outlet? And I think we often close our minds and think that has to be painting, singing, these kind of more visual art forms. Yeah. But if we were to really sit down and think about what does creating look like, I know that we would find that almost everything is creating. Yeah. Like, even when we just started out this conversation, we talked about the beauty of just connection, right? And how sometimes it doesn't have to be words, it can just be listening.
Yes.
When you just listen, you are creating. You're creating an energy, a space, you're holding space for someone, you're creating. I mean, just the way that conversation is painting. It is. I mean, so to those who are sort of listening and thinking, how might I express myself when I don't have a vehicle like that? I think it's really about getting creative, about what creativity looks like for you.
Exactly.
Are you a hands person? If you just start there, great. Well, there's so much one can do with their hands. Tactile, real things, building, gardening. Jacob's amazing. It reminded me of this, doing, and he says he learns it all from you. So, I mean, he talks about the salt and pepper on the table and how you used to personify these for him when he was young, and how he would actually come to find that there was so much creativity just on the dinner table from the kinds of cutlery and porcelain plates that were sitting there. So, yes, it's very important to have a vehicle, but let's open our minds to what that could be, because everything is here because of some form of creation. Everything is here because it's been created in some way.
That's right. So it's all part of creativity. Yes.
Yeah. So absolutely, it's important to find a vocabulary, to find a framework to exist in that's creative, and then begins the divine kind of conversation that can flow forth from that. And the sculptor has the same experience. The sculptor creates something and goes, whoa, stands back from it, and a year later realizes that he's just sculpted his deceased father or something, but never realized it at the time. The sculptor, of course, realizes that, he's processing trauma from his childhood through the thing much later. Like, anything can become a larger story. Yes. It's just about first engaging with it, not demanding meaning from it from the outset.
No, that's right. But that's the same. If we come back to your seed of an idea, it's exactly the same. If you look at the seed and you're looking at it expectantly, saying, right, something, you are going to be, have got the capacity to be my next hit. But, are you going to actually come up with the goods? Once we start doing that, we've got expectation, we've got judgment, we've got all sorts of things. And I think you are so right about the kind of essence of, we all need to find out where the creativity is. And you literally touched upon the idea of tactile and being able to touch. And I think that bringing in the different senses in there and increasing your sensory awareness brings you in a place where you might be able to express in some kind of a way. And it may really surprise you. It's not necessarily going to be an art form or something you want to put on the wall, but there'll be something. And I think as long as you remain curious and indeed playful, and therefore, if you're playful, then you're gonna want to be a bit daring, and maybe you're not gonna mind so much what other people think.
Right. No, I think that's what comes with falling in love with a creative art form.
Totally.
Stop caring. You got to fall in love with something. You got to fall, and it could be anything from like fragrances or engineering, and architecture, or building. People make these little. I have a girlfriend. Her friend works on these small statues where it's like a thing that a lot of people do now. They just set up these small Lego-sized pieces, and then they create whole worlds with them. There's no reason for it except for it's fun. You just make little men and they have weapons and stuff, and then I wish I could remember the name of it, because it's a big subculture, but it's like when my friend's husband was doing it, I was thinking to myself, what? There's no reason for that, but it's just creating. Why not? It makes them happy. It's beautiful to look at. mathematical, you know. And
are you talking about Legos, or you're not talking
not
about
Lego?
Legos?
No, it's like something like that. I'm going to find it out and I'm going to send it to you later.
Just text it later, okay?
I will. Yeah,
I really want to know.
It's a whole thing.
But it's true. It's whatever world you find yourself, I guess, slightly excited and lit up by.
Yeah.
And it really could be anything from having a pebble in your hand to seeing the most amazing show. I mean, it can be anything, can't it? Or it can be something that you are actually expressing yourself. But I think there are ways to be able to express what's going on. But we don't necessarily understand what we're expressing at the time. I think that's it. You put it so well.
That's the key.
It is,
right.
Isn't it?
That's the key. We can't demand too much from it. It's kind of like, I'm thinking as well, because about the senses, like so many things are creative. Like the body is creative, obviously. Exercise is creative. Sex is creative. Like no wonder we have all these like, you know, strange worlds of, you know, sex and physical exercise things that open up, because it's like, it's another creative expression. Then people get into little nooks and crannies of that and come up with different things. But it's like, you can't go into exercise and demand a result immediately. You just have to start doing it, right? And then over time something, you know, comes out of it. But we have to look at the more mind-based or heart-based things the same. They're muscles that they just take time to reveal what they have in store for us. And, you know, we're just very impatient, I think.
I think we're really impatient, but I think we're really fearful too. I think it's quite a scary thing. You know?
Well, yeah, let's talk more about that. So why do you think it's so scary?
Because I think any form of intimacy that you're not kind of feeling or experiencing every day is potentially a slightly scary thing.
Because you're not in control of where it's going to take you?
You don't know where it's going to take you at all. Whereas, you know, whatever kind of form of intimacy you feel most at home with, somebody else with whom you're having that intimacy might just say, well, I don't feel at home in that way. I don't want to talk about these things now because I feel that's too intimate. People say that, don't they?
Yeah,
but when we're talking about all things relationships, then I think, there are certain parts of intimacy that we exercise and really exercise a lot. And there are some others that we don't. And I do think it's scary because it's unpredictable. You're not controlling it. And there's a huge potential to be hurt or to be rejected in there. There are all these huge kind of very human ideas that I think that can come up when we talk about intimacy, especially intimacy that we're not experiencing all the time.
So here's a thought. Maybe it is a little hard to ask people to jump right into a creative act when we think about that, right? That this is like kind of scary for a lot of people. And not talking like it's not scary for me. It's terrifying for me many days, you know? But like maybe a first step is just do something that's not functional.
Yes.
Like when you do something that has a function, like I don't know, whatever, like doing the dishes or just anything that has a function of an outcome, you're relatively in control. You know what you're going to get at the end of that. It has a function. But what about just doing one thing? Doesn't have to be Michelangelo's art. It just doesn't have a function. It doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't have a purpose. You don't get a thing at the end. What a great place to start. Like even I could really take something from that today. Like I fill up my days all the time with just things that, you know, are doing and achieving and accomplishing. And maybe if we could just train ourselves little by little to do something that has no point at all, except that it might just feel nice.
Exactly. So it might feel nice, but going back to your previous point about the intimacy thing, you might find that you can find an intimacy in something that you are doing that doesn't serve a function at all, or something that you are experiencing. I think it's the same thing. And I think those are real fear destroyers, which is fantastic.
Yeah, we need them. We need them.
We kind of need a whole lot of those.
Yeah, totally.
Because I think fear comes knocking at the door in all sorts of unexpected places. But I think it's, often when we cannot really quite quantify something and we don't really get it. But I love it. Let's do something that doesn't serve a function.
I mean, just as a place to start, right?
Yeah. That's a beautiful place to start. I think that's a wonderful place to start. Can I ask you, what have you got tattooed on your arm that you think that you might remember to look at perhaps before you go on stage?
Oh, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Well, I'm going to have to just pull up. Just give me a second.
Okay, I'm ready for you.
This one is a very literal reminder, but one of my favorite words in the human language, in the English language, or all human language, is
I like that.
just beloved. Beloved, beloved, the word, and I guess it can also be read as be loved.
Yes.
Be loved, yeah,
yes.
Beloved. And I don't know, whenever I've heard that word used, from a mother to a daughter, or like, I guess it's used in a religious sense sometimes for, you are the beloved of God, I just find it such a precious, it's just such a precious word to say to someone and to say to yourself, and also a beautiful reminder that love is given out, but you have to let yourself receive it. Like someone can be pouring out love on you.
Yes.
But if you don't think you're worthy of that love,
you can't receive.
You can't receive it. You're just pushing it away. It doesn't matter how much love there is. But the more that I build up with that and really feel, no, I really am, beloved.
Love it.
The more I can pour out on my audience, and really that abundance comes alive of just like, there's so much to give. I'm not going to run out. I'm not going to run out because I'm so full up with it.
Yes.
And then there's some other sort of like lines I have on my body here that are just, they run along my veins on my arm that is broken, right? So this one doesn't extend properly. It only goes out that far, I think. I broke it when I was very young, so it's kind of stuck in that position. So it's a bit of a reminder for me to look at that arm on stage and remind myself that my body is, literally imperfect by design. It doesn't extend properly. It doesn't, the ultimate way. But that's okay. And I love that. And that's what people also like about my work.
Yes.
It reminds me of a very difficult time in my life. Right before I moved to New York, I decided I wasn't going to run from my pain anymore, but instead I was going to mark my body with it and say, you are part of me now. I'm going to take back the power. I'm not going to be a victim to pain. I'm going to, in fact, inflict pain on my arm as a mode of power to say, like, I can withstand. I mean, tattoo isn't that bad compared to the kind of physical things people endured, but, it's an act, a symbolic act of saying, I think when I went to Ethiopia, I saw tattoo in a different way. I wasn't just like hipster Brooklyn people. I saw how tattoo in parts of Africa is used as you are marking your body with your they are scars of where you've been. They are wounds. They are also marks of beauty and power and resilience. So I think just the very act of having reminders on the body that you have done to yourself, as opposed to being, feeling that you are always the inflicted by life. You sort of take the power back and say, no, I'm going to mark this on myself as a reminder that this is part of me. I don't need to run from it. It fuels me. It's not going anywhere, but I'm stronger for it.
But you're stronger for it. So what I really want to know is, you say that you did that having experienced a really pretty difficult chapter. And this is before you moved to New York. So what I want to know is, I mean, obviously we go through things, and actually you went through having the marks on you, and you realized the weight and meaning of it and how empowering it was for you. Right. But when you got to New York, did you feel that you had left those shackles behind, of just feeling that it's all coming at you and now I can own it? Or did you feel that it took a while for you to really understand the fullness of what you had actually done to empower yourself?
That is such a good question, because it's so easy to assume that one means, I got better and everything got better.
Yes.
And I marked myself and now I'm fine.
Yes.
But it was sort of, actually, you're right that it takes a long time to heal from things. But I experienced what I call a transcendent moment in Tompkins Square Park in New York City, where it occurred to me that I no longer needed to be free from my pain to kind of be like, well, now it's over, my anxiety and years of, depression and the things that I've been struggling with. Well, now it's gone. So now I can kind of celebrate and get a tattoo. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
But now I know that, and I can hold that, and I can make room for it. I can live with it.
Yeah.
With it. Not despite it, I can live. So it's sort of it's a holding. It's a new ability to hold. And I tell this to anyone who struggles with anxiety or, racing, intrusive thoughts. A lot of our rhetoric is to eliminate them,
That's right.
And
it's the first
power
thing. Absolutely.
Is to eliminate
Get rid
them.
of it.
Stop.
I know.
Stop.
Yes.
But what you do when you do that is you create a tug of war, because now you're fighting with it, so you're feeding it.
Yeah.
But the moment that you actually make a little room for it in your lounge, you put a little cushion, you put some milk and cookies or whatever, right?
Yes.
And you're like, you can stay the night. I'm not that happy about it, but you can stay the night because I don't want you out on the streets, and I do love you. I'm mad at you, but I do love you, and you can stay. I think that's more what it was. It was like a marking to be like, you can stay. It's all right. And we're going to work together.
Absolutely. And, you very kindly say that you'd put the milk and cookies out for one night because you don't want to see that on the street. But actually, they can stay as long as they like. Because in the same way that there's an infinite amount to give in terms of love and energy, there's actually an infinite amount of space to hold all the experiences that we've ever had. And we don't need to just say, well, there are certain taboos that I really can't ever talk about because it's just too painful. In one sense, when you're talking to yourself, they can be all welcome. And there really is room, isn't there?
I'm realizing there is. It took me a long time, though, to believe there was room. I don't know. It just feels like we're so it's crazy. This is making me emotional because it's just like sometimes in life these things seem so simple, and I'm like, I get angry at myself, like, why didn't you work this out sooner? That there's room for all of it. Like, why? But you can't go around it. You've got to go through it. Unfortunately, the only way you learn this is by expanding the heart and learning that it's infinite. But that's a growing pain. As it grows larger to house all the feelings,
you're
it
right.
hurts.
That's really beautiful. Yes, the archetypal growing pains. And it would be said to a growing child, wouldn't it? And that child is meant to just feel, oh, this is ghastly pain, but it's there for a really good reason. And actually, maybe all the experiences that we have, maybe we don't really understand why they're there or why they have happened. But whatever the situation is, they are part of our fabric. And you can't just put that fabric in a washing machine and wash it out. Or indeed, I love the idea when you literally you said, stop and eliminate. And there's something so powerful and yet something that's so weak about that.
I know.
Because if you really need to put up the hand and say stop and to eliminate that memory for forever, it's going to fester in a way. Mm-hmm. It's not that it wasn't.
I don't know if it's strong. I think it's violent. I think there's a violence to that. That's that energy of, But I mean, it's strong physically, I guess, to make that motion,
but not strong in other ways. Yes.
Yeah, because really, strength is the acceptance, isn't it? To welcome in anything and actually be resilient in the face of many things.
Yes.
And hold many things at once. Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that those things that we have been through are really, really not horrible. Because they are, and they're really, really tough, and they're really, really challenging. But it is what we do with all that. I mean, you say it's taken you an awful long time to really realise that. I think it's taken me way, way longer than you to really understand that in all its fullness. And actually having the three chicks that I've had, I think they really kind of taught me how to engage with that part and to really understand. So it's amazing because, you talk about Jacob and, you two have looked at each other's lists and stuff. And that's a really intimate thing because those lists are really precious and they're not up on social media. They are a really intimate thing. But in order to have that trust to just actually say, well, this is what maybe I think about when I really am down, is saying, I really get down, you know?
Exactly.
And isn't that just wonderful that you can say that and not think, you know, this is a label that that people are just going to remember me by? Doesn't it just make you view another person and just feel, you're so rounded. You've experienced just so much more because you realize what it is like not to be on a kind of false sense of even keel.
Right. Yes. I live for those moments. I mean, I really live for those moments, especially in a world where, there's so much two-dimensional, you know, posturing. It's just like a breath of fresh air when you realize everyone has got the same insecurities, and we need to learn from each other. Like, we need the tool, like I just call it a toolkit when people are, how do you manage your, you know, career and anxiety and things. It's just like, well, I have a toolkit. I haven't worked it out, but I have a toolkit, and I pick things up from all these different people. I've got about 3 things from you today, Suzie, for my toolkit, honestly. I've got a bunch of things from Jacob. I picked up things from, you know, all kinds of people, homeless men on the street who have said something that's become a toolkit. And that's really the best you can do, you know? It's just keep a great toolkit on hand.
Well, I really agree. And I know we've talked for a long time. And the thing is,
I'd keep going all day.
I really would keep going all day. I have to be really honest. There are just so many questions that I've got on the tip of my tongue. But I'm really aware that, you know, we've talked for a long time, and maybe we need to just leave it there and have another conversation at another time. Because I just feel that in the same way that you can have a seed of an idea, I feel there are so many seeds of ideas that are just kind of, they've sprung forth, and I want to see where they go. And when either we meet face to face, either on this side of the pond or your side of the pond, it will be a glorious thing. And I hope that it isn't just for a fleeting moment. I hope that we can actually have a little time that means that we can just pick up just where we kind of want to from this conversation, because I have loved every second of it. I feel so lucky to have spent this time with you today. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you so much for opening such a beautiful, you know, vulnerable and honest space. I don't get many chances to really talk this real. So thank you. It's a blessing for me too.